Welcome to Canary Quilts. You can get our free patterns in our free resource library located at canaryquilts.com. You can access this from the library access page. Scroll down the page to sign up for a free password to enter our free resource library or click to enter the free resource library. Once in our free resource library, you will have access to all our free patterns and downloads. We put out a new free pattern every Friday. I hope you enjoy this video and please subscribe to our channel so you will be notified of all our new content. Thank you. Okay, to get started on this pickle dish paper piece pattern, which I've called Pickled Pick Me Up, because I love the colors and I love doing a paper piece, so it just like picks my mood up. So that's why I called it a Pickled Pick Me Up little block that I'm doing today. So these are the colors I've chosen, and I need 3 colors. My pattern shows several colors here, but this dark purple will be where these colors are. The yellow will be here, and I chose that so that these dark purple points will really stand out when it's done. And then the background will be this light purple. And here's just a block that I did just to test out this pattern. So this is going to be the dark purple, this will be the yellow, and this will be the lavender color. So I've got 3 fat quarters here, which will work for all of your fabrics. So I'm going to set my fat quarters aside. And I also want to show you that I found some newspaper print paper on Amazon. And it's made for kids projects, but a lot of people were commenting about how well it worked for paper piecing. And I printed these out on my inkjet printer, and they went through just fine. And so it's a much lighter paper. So when you use a smaller stitch with this light paper, the paper will just come right off in the end. Okay, so the first thing, so once you get this pattern off of my website, which at the beginning of the video I tell you how to do, and you get it printed onto your paper, I'm going to take these outside edges here of this part of the pattern. Here's the outside edges right here. And I am going to, you only need to cut one of these out because you can flip it. I'm going to add 1/8 of an inch to these outside portions of my pattern so that when we're done with putting the block together, the outside will have that 1/8 of an inch so that I can use it to square up my block in the end. So let's find 1/8 of an inch marking here on my ruler, and I'm just going to draw a line like that. 1/8 of an inch here, and just draw a line there. So when I cut this out, I'm going to cut this on the 1/8 of an inch line. Let's just cut this right out here. And then I'm going to cut the rest right on those outside lines. You don't have to do this extra, but I think in the end, to square up your block, I think you'll find it helpful. So that's what my outer piece is going to look like. That's what's going to go right here. So this inside piece, which is right here, does not need 1/8 of an inch added because it's not on the outside of the block. So let's just cut this one out. So there's those 2 pieces, and like I said, this will flip over like this, so you don't need to cut this second piece out if you don't want to, and I am not going to. these blocks go right here. So we're going to need 1/8 of an inch added to one of the corners of this block. So let's put the 1/8 of an inch here on this side. I'm going to draw a line across. Oops, I didn't go far enough. And then I'm going to do 1/8 of an inch on this side. So I've got this corner will be, or one of these outside corners, it'll actually work out. I'll do it to, well, I only need one of these too. What am I thinking? I only need one of these. So there's our 1/8 of an inch added to our corner. So there's our corner piece. So it'll be fine here because this is an inside, but we want the 1/8 of an inch to be outside to match these two pieces. And then I'm making 4 blocks. So 3 fat quarters will give me 4 blocks. So this here, I've printed 4 of them for all 4 of my blocks here, as you can see. I'm just going to cut one of these out, and you'll just cut right on the outside line also. Okay, so for my pointed blocks here, my paper piece, I've got these two. I've got 4 papers printed because I'm going to make 4 blocks. And I'm just going to cut these out, leave some paper around each of them to work with, like that. So I will have all this paper to hold on to while I'm working with it. So all my paper pieces are ready to go. So one thing I want to show you with these outside pieces, you always want to cut your outer edge with the grain of the fabric so it doesn't stretch. If you cut it like this, this is on a bias and your fabric's going to stretch as it goes. So you want it to be on the grain because it won't stretch. I'll just put a little weight on this, and I'm going to cut this. So there's my piece cut with the grain right here on the edges. I'll cut one more. There's my 2 outer edges. I'm just going to put my inner right here, and I only need 1 for this first block I'm doing. There's our, And this is it's a curve, so it's going to be on the bias anyway. So I'll leave that just in case. Won't cut off any extra fabric till I need to. So that's the background and how to cut that. So we've added 1/8 of an inch to our pattern so that we have that leeway to square it up in the end. I have cut these outside edges with the straight of the grain here, not on a bias. So these are ready to go. And then all I need to do now is cut my squares out of these 2 pieces of fabric so that I can get my paper pieces to fit in here. I'm going to cut just a bunch of squares, and I need the same square for these 2, so that's incorporated into the pattern. So I'm going to get those cut real quick. Okay, we are ready to start assembling our block. So I've got my pieces cut here for paper piecing. Like I said, the dark purple's going to go where the colors are, and the yellow's going to go right here where the beige is. I've got 1 block already cut out of my background fabric. And then this little square is already incorporated into these, so when we need it, I'll cut it. So I'm going to go over to my machine and start putting this together. Okay, so I'm over here at my machine now, and I've got everything I'm going to need. I've got my pieces for paper piecing here. I've got my background pieces, and I've got my papers. I've got a small rotary cutter, and I've got my add a quarter ruler so that when I'm folding my paper piece over with my fabric, I can just butt it up against the paper and cut my fabric at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm going to get started here. This one's labeled A, this one's labeled B, so I will start with A. A1 is up here. So I've got A1 here, which is going to be my purple, and I'm going to sew on the back of my paper. So the lines are, you can see the lines through the paper. I don't know if you can in the video, but you can see them through the paper right here. So I need to lay my, just to show you what I'm going to do on the other side, I'm going to lay my purple right here, a 1/4 inch over that line, and then I'm going to lay my yellow on top of it. I'm going to sew on that A1 line so that when we're done, we'll flip it over and we'll have our yellow and our purple here on A1 and A2. So that's what I'm going to do on the other side here. I'm going to put A1 facing me, and you always want to make sure your blocks are going to cover this seam allowance also when they're folded over and ironed. So I'm going to start with my purple, and I'm going to lay it a 1/4 inch over this line. And for video purposes, I'm going to draw this line. Even though I can see it, that's the line I want to go a 1/4 inch over with both my pieces. Approximate. And then I'm just going to use some tape here, some washi tape to hold my piece down while I'm sewing. The other thing is you only want to sew this line right here. You only want to sew right here. You don't want to sew up into the seam allowance because you're going to want this seam allowance to have some stretch in it later. So only sew on this solid line. Okay, so I'm going to get that sewn. Okay, I've got my A1 paper piece here, and I'm going to start with A1, which is right here on this side. And I'm going to take my two pieces, so the dark purple is going to be here and the yellow is going to be here. So when I flip this over, I'm going to have my purple here first with my yellow on top, and then I'm going to have it overlapping this black line here, which is the A1 line, by 1/4 of an inch. So I've taped it so that it doesn't scoot on me when I take it over to my machine. So now I'm going to flip this back over and I'm going to sew right along this A1 line. So it's hard to see, but there's my stitch. I'm going to pull the paper off, or not the paper, the tape. And now I'm going to go over to my iron and I'll iron my piece over just like this. So what we've got is we've got our purple piece covering right here, and our yellow piece is covering here. But I only sewed on the black line right there. You don't want to sew out here into the seam allowance because you're going to need that seam allowance when you're putting the center and the outside edges together. You're going to need a little bit of that play or movement right there to help them fit. I'm going to get it ironed. So your first pieces are always different. That's how you do your first pieces. From here on out, the rest of our pieces are going to be exactly the same. Just got to keep track of which piece you're doing. So now we're on A3. We're going to be doing this piece, so I'm going to need a purple. And what I want to do is I want to fold on this line right here, the next unstitched line. I'm going to fold it on that line. I'm going to take my add 1/4. I'm butting it up against the paper. You can see that when I move it, it stops. So I'm going to butt it up and I'm going to use the little rotary cutters to cut my 1/4 inch seam allowance, just like that. So now I will turn it back, unfold it, and we want the piece to be able to lay right there. You want it to cover that. So we're going to put it on just like this, line it up with the cut we just made, and you can see that when we fold it over 1/4 of an inch, it's going to cover that area. So now we take it over to the machine and we're gonna sew on this A3 line right here. So there, I've sewed it. Now I'm going to iron it open like that. So we're getting there. So now the steps we're going to take for every one of these pieces is lay it with your colors face up, your colored paper face up. You're going to fold on the next unsewn line. Take your ruler and cut your 1/4 inch seam allowance. Our next color is going to be A4, which is yellow. Take a yellow. So you can see where I'm looking. This is the line I want to have coverage on. Line it up with your seam allowance and then sew it down. Didn't sew the first half for some reason. And then when you're done, you're going to take your piece and iron it open. So I'm going to do a couple more of these, but they're exactly the same. Lay with your color printed side up, fabric on the bottom, latest stitches towards you, and the next line I'm going to fold on is this A5 line, and it's going to be a purple color. Fold it on that A5 line, trim your 1/4 of an inch, unfold, take your next color, line it up, and I'll just show you again. This line is what I'm trying to have coverage of, and then sew it down. And iron it open like that. Lay your piece down with your fabric towards you. Next line is A6. Fold it there. Cut your seam allowance. Grab your next color. Line it up. Sew it. Iron it open. And that's what you're going to get. You're going to start to get this all the way around here. So I'm going to finish this up, and I'm going to finish it up exactly the same way I just showed you. Okay, I'm down to the last 2 pieces, and I wanted to show you how what we'll do after we get our pieces on. So this last one is right here on A19. Fold it, cut our 1/4 inch seam allowance, grab our purple square, line it up, sew it, press it. So this is what it looks like when we're completely done with all of this here. And you can see I've only sewn those inside lines. So now, before I go on to the next one I'll sew off camera, but it's going to be exactly the same as this one. I want to show you how I'm going to cut this one. So I'm going to cut on these outside edges. Oops, it would help if I opened my blade. So I cut it off right on that seam allowance edge. I'm going to do the same on this other side. And now we're going to carefully cut along these curved seam allowance edges. I'm going to get my bigger, sharper that's what it looks like finished. So we'll pull the paper off this, and because we didn't go all the way to the end of the seam allowance, we'll have some play in these seam allowances to put our pieces, our inside and outside pieces on. So I'm going to go and get my second paper piece all done, and then I'll show you how to start assembling this block. Okay, so here's my two paper pieces done and put together. So the next thing we want to do is just to gently pull the paper off the backs of these. And with that really small stitch you use, they practically fall off. Plus with this newspaper print paper that I found, just makes it just comes off so easily. It just practically falls off. So there's our first piece with the paper pulled off. And I would press it again, because once you pull this off, it kind of pulls your threads up, so you want to flatten those again. There, flattened threads. So we'll do the same thing over on this one. So I don't know if you can see it, but the threads look a little puffy. So that's why we need to go back and just give them a press again. So now they're nice and flat. Okay, so we got our paper pulled off. So the next thing we're gonna do is put one of these pieces on here. And it doesn't look like it's gonna fit, But you got to take into account the 1/4 inch seam allowance on both of these. And then it fits. So we need to find the middle of this one. And you can just give it a finger press. And gently fold this one. And press it so you can see the crease. So now we're going to match creases up. And we're going to pin at the crease. And then we're going to match these edges up. And we got that weird looking piece now. Okay, so we've got this. We've got our centers matched and our edges. So this is where you're going to want this play in this area down here, why we didn't sew that and why we took the paper off. So you can see that once you start stretching that out a little bit, it's going to lay. It's going to lay really nice, so we can get our nice 1/4 inch right here. And you can use an awl to kind of help you keep it in place. So at this point you can turn your stitch back up because we don't have paper to pull off. Okay, so again, I changed my stitch to the normal stitch length, which I think is 2.2 or 2.5. And I'm going to start sewing this. And I'm going to use my awl to hold it in place also. And there's no need to go fast on this. I'm going to stop here at my crease and I'm going to regroup for the other half. So that's what we've got. So what I'm going to do is go over to my iron and gently press this way. And I want to press towards, I want to press it in the amount of least resistance. So that's going to be just like that. That's how this block wants to lay. So that's how I'm going to press it. There we go. That looks really nice. And these, and like I said, leaving these seams open like this just helps it fit without giving you any wrinkles. Okay, same thing for this side. Find the center, finger press, Find this center, finger press, line the two creases up and pin it, line the edges up and pin it. And at this point, just like before, let these seam allowances that are open work with your curve so that you can sew right along here. And again, take it over and iron it towards the path of least resistance, gently. So we've got our two outer edges on. So what I need to do is now take two yellow pieces, cut them down to the right size, and then we're going to put those yellow pieces on each side of this. Okay, I've got my two yellow pieces cut to my square size. So these are going to just fit right there. And that way fits better. And I'm just going to sew a 1/4 inch seam right there. And I am going to iron that this way, because if I remember correctly, when I start doing the middle piece, that is going to be ironed this way, and so I'll be able to nest these seams. Plus, it's the path of least resistance is what it feels like. We'll do the other side. Okay, so this piece looks like this. Which way? There we go. This way. So now with this piece, we need to find the center of this one, and we're going to crease it, finger crease it. And then we're going to find the center of this, which is pretty much right at that point. And we're going to do the same thing, match our creases, pin it, match our ends, pin it, and then use our awl and these open and the seam allowances that we didn't sew shut to sew this together. It always helps to have your needle down, because then you can maneuver your material around without it coming out of the machine. Okay. I'm going to get to my crease and I'm going to regroup there again. Okay, so again, this is how it's going to be. Path of least resistance is going to be to iron it this way. So there's this piece. Now we need to put these pieces together. So we are going to again find our centers on both and do exactly the same thing. I'm creasing to find my center. And again, the center of this looks to be that point right there. And we're going to pin the centers and the ends. And like I said earlier, the way the path of least resistance went was, and it happens to work out that they're nested. These two seams are nested right there. So we'll nest those two seams and pin at that seam. And then we'll do the same thing over here. We can nest these two seams. See how they just fall together? And pin. And so, just like we did the other ones, using our awl and these open seam allowances here. So I'm going to sew up to my nested seams. See where I'm at. Get my fabric back together. Get my curve going in the right direction. line up my edges over here with the square and finish it off. And the path of least resistance seems to be with the seam being folded in here. So I'm going to carefully get that ironed. So next is going to be trimming the block to size. So I've got all my blocks trimmed to 6.5 inches, and as you can see, I've gotten my 4 blocks done. And after 4 blocks, you should be a master at this, right? But when trimming my blocks, I just want you to make note that I tried as best I could here to keep 1/4 of an inch here between the edge of the outer border and the paper piece. Some are a little close. I'll have to work with it, but that's how I tried to, that's the guide I used to square up my blocks. So now we're going to put these blocks together, and I'm just gonna do this, put these two together, put these two together. I'll line up these seams, the yellow blocks right here, I'll line those up, and then sew on this edge 1/4 inch seam. And I'm going to do that to both of these. Take it over to my machine and I'm going to get that sewn and show you what that looks like. Okay, I got my 2 top and bottom pieces sewn together, and I'm going to put my quilt together this way, so I will flip it and do this. Put it together like this, match these center seams. But I just wanted to show you, if you flip these, how different it looks. That's pretty cool. So, but I'm going to keep mine like this. I like that kind of flower petal look. And like I said, I'm going to match these center seams. And I sewed, or I ironed my other seams open. So I'll match that center seam and then I'll work my way outward that way. Get this sewn in my either mini quilt or just quilt block. We'll be done. Okay, I'm gonna go and get this 1/4 inch seam done. I'll be right back. There it is, my finished little mini quilt top, or it could be a quilt block in a larger quilt. So there you go. That's a tutorial on the Pickled dish Pick Me Up pattern. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments what you think. If you have any suggestions on how I put it together or anything like that, I'd love to hear it. So thank you very much. Hey, this is Carrie with Canary Quilts, and I just wanted to show you my Pickled Pick Me Up pattern finished. I put a border around it. It ended up being a 1-inch border, and then I put blocks in the side here, these 1-inch blocks, and then I bound it with dark purple. And I'll turn it around, or I'll get up closer. I did some quilting in there, stippling and some feathers in the middle. So I wanted to show you how it turned out. It's quite a detailed pattern, and I went into a lot of detail in my video, and if you made it this long, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.